Hi, Natalie. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, I'm so excited. We are having a very special interview today on the Jewish Women Entrepreneurs podcast. And it's actually in honor of the International Women's Day, which is tomorrow. Everybody relax. It's not today. We just couldn't do the interview tomorrow. So we're doing it today. And I was actually thinking about what best way to celebrate women and women's leadership in honor of International Women's Day. And that's when I thought about our Queen Esther and Purim, which is coming up, the holiday of Purim. And I was looking for an expert in, with whom I could have that conversation, talking about the Queen Esther, talking about the Megillah, talking about Purim, talking about women. And actually, a dear friend of mine, Noemi Ben Shimol, recommended Sophie. And she said, you must speak to Sophie. She's amazing. You'll have a great podcast with her. I said, great. We got in touch. And here we are, Sophie. So I'm so happy that you agreed to be on our podcast today. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, so actually, I want to start with, for those of you who don't know who Sophie is, I want to start with giving a short bio of Sophie. Sophie is a graduate of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and she had studied at various progressive yeshivot in Israel and in the US. She's part of the Talmud faculty at Hillel Deutschland and works as a Jewish educator for JEM, which I forgot what it stands for already. Sophie, can you remind me?
Judaism. Yes, it's in French. I apologize to our English-speaking audience. Judaisme en mouvement.
Judaism en Mouvement. Okay, great. An umbrella organization of progressive synagogues in Paris. So, Sophie, the first thing I want to ask you, and we already discussed this before when we prepared for this interview, is talking about the character of Esther, of Queen Esther, throughout the whole Megillah. We're a little bit in the beginning. She seems to be very young. She seems to be very passive. We don't hear her voice so much. Mordechai is much more present. He's the one doing everything. She's more following. There are even like words in Hebrew that are more the passive, tense, where she's being taken to places. And then we see that she's becoming slowly. We see a transformation of her character throughout the Megillah, and then happens what happens, and at the end she's the heroine of the story. Can you tell us more about this transformation and what are the different steps that Esther is going through in the Megillah?
Right. So absolutely. You pointed out to the fact already that Esther is introduced to us in a very passive mode, right? The verb that's associated with her again and again is lakach, taken. She is taken from the young girls of the country to the court. She's taken to the king, and after she's been crowned king, we are told that Esther still obeys the command of Mordechai, right? So what I offer to is, and I invite all of us following us to grab a Tanakh if they have one, go on Sefaria, and come along. We're going to try to walk you through quickly the different chapters of Megillat Esther and see, really looking at the text, the evolution of a character throughout the Megillah. So at the beginning, we said she's taken, right? And then she's being placed in the palace, where she's eventually chosen by the king as the most beautiful young woman for him to marry as his new king. We'll talk about why there's a need for a new queen very soon. But for now, chapter 2, verse 20, we hear the following. אין אסתר מולדת את עמה, כאשר ציווה עליה מרדכי. Esther did not tell which people she came from, as Mordechai had commanded her, right? So for now, the verbs associated with Esther are lakar, she's taken, and tziva, she's been commanded, right? Pushing forward in chapter 2, verse 22, Mordechai learned of it and told it to Queen Esther, and Esther reported it to the king in Mordechai's name, right? It seems now that Mordechai is someone, a pipeline initiative. In another chapter, in another pasuk, in another verse, we read the following: When Esther's maiden and eunuchs came and informed her, the queen was greatly agitated. She sent clothing for Mordechai to wear, so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he refused. So Esther cares for him, sends clothes, and he has the power to refuse, right? We've never heard Esther refuse anything to Mordechai. But the opposite. And interestingly enough, we're getting closer to the point of switching between different models of Esther's personality. Esther learns from the method of Mordechai. He refused to take off his mourning clothes and doesn't tell Esther straight away the reason for his despair, right? In the same way, Esther is going to later not straight away tell the king the reason for her own despair. Where she wants to annul Amman's decree. So pushing along again now in chapter 4, we hear again in verse 8 again the verse being commended. He also gave him the written text of the law that had been proclaimed in Shushan for the destruction. There's the Jews, of course. He bade him show it to Esther and inform her and charge her to go to the king and appeal to him. Again, Esther is only a pawn in the end of Mordechai.
Right.
And here is the turning point.
So we see,
13.
Right.
Mordechai had this.
Sorry, I can you hear me? Because I'm not sure we have a very good connection. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Oh, okay, good. Because there was a problem in connection, and I was going to say that it seems very clear that that Esther in the beginning has a really passive way of being in the story, and she's not at the center of the story. So my question to you is, what happened that made her switch to taking more control over her life, but also in finding a solution for saving the Jews? Do you see in the text, when do we see this transition happening?
So I think that the verse that really encapsulates the change is verse 13 of chapter 4, when she says, "Do not imagine." When she says to sorry, not verse 4, without being asked, she says that you can't just show up in front of the king and be like, "I have something to tell you," right? You need to wait for the king to be and the power dynamic is because cannot know, and I think that's really the turning point.
I'm sorry.
After that, we see a complete reverse.
The connection is not good,
right? She commends him, "Lech k'tzayim b'Shushan," and gather.
Cannot hear me. Connection is really not good.